open, because you actually can only apply during the open period or when it's coming open, there's.
All right. JD, can you hear us? Perfect. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's meeting here in Salt Lake City. We're excited for those that are joining here in person and those in remote. We'll go ahead and get started by reading the spiel. So this meeting is being held virtually and in person and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting was provided as required under Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah's open meetings law, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved written minutes will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 days after board approval. Let's see, and then next says every proposed agenda item must have a 1-page summary of the topic submitted to MCPAB@utah.gov no later than 7 days prior to the board meeting. Board members will present the 1-page summary during board meetings, and board members will discuss the summary. If no written summary is provided to board staff, the relevant agenda item will be removed from the agenda. Only items that have been submitted in writing in advance of board meetings will be allowed during discussion by the board chair, including presentations from the public. Board members will then request additional presentation and memorandums on the agenda item from relevant bodies to be presented at the next board meeting. Those presentations and memos will also need to be submitted to MCPAB@utah.gov 7 days prior to the board meeting. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the chair. The chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. A public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. You can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Notice website. Please state your name and your affiliation when making a public comment so it can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item not listed on the agenda, please email them to MCPAB@utah.gov. In making a comment over Zoom, the Zoom public chat will be disabled during Zoom meetings. When the chair indicates it is time for public comments, you will use the raise hand icon on Zoom to indicate that you would like to make a comment. When you're called on, you will be taken off mute. Take 2 minutes to make your comment. Please fill out the public comment sign-in sheet at the head of this table if you're wanting to make a comment in person. Those of you online, sign in. Let's see, although this is in person, the chair will indicate when it is time for the public comment period. The board chair will call on you when it is your turn and you will come to the public comment table. Take 2 minutes to make your comment. As a reminder, if you're in person, please do not speak when others are presenting. Our mics are very sensitive and those attending over Zoom cannot hear when there is more than one person talking at a time. Side conversations and comments from the public during this board meeting are prohibited. All right, and please use a voice that is louder than your typical one when speaking, commenting, or presenting. When you speak, please lean in towards the table as if there is a microphone. For additional information, to make a suggestion for agenda items or to contact board members or staff, send an email to MCPAB@utah.gov. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. We'll move on to the item of approval minutes for our May 2025. Did everyone on the board get a chance to read over and look at the minutes? Are there any changes or modifications that you want to make? If not, I'll look for an approval.
Motion to approve. I'll second.
All right, we have a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is approved. Let's see, I didn't hear.
I said aye. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can't hear you, JD. Des, can you say anything?
Yeah,
I don't know if we have a speaker.
can you hear me? So I can hear you guys online, JD and Desiree, I can hear you both.
Yeah, I can hear
I
you.
can hear all of you. I just don't think they can hear us.
Just 1 second.
That's okay. I'm comfortable here.
Guys, can you go ahead and speak?
I am speaking. I usually don't stop.
There we go. Okay, we can now hear you.
Okay.
All
All
three of us voted yes, Matt, to approve the minutes.
Perfect. I was hoping for maybe a little controversy and get a split vote. All right. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the administrative business. So really the only thing I have is I had a meeting today with the Office of Legislative Audit Governance, I think is what it's, OLAG.
Office of Legislative Auditor General.
Auditor General. So I had a meeting with them today and discussing my role in MCPAB and how we're getting help from both UDAF and DHHS. That was just the beginning of our interviews. They may be reaching out to any one of you as a board member to have a meeting with to discuss how you feel things are going. And so it's not a scary meeting. So they're really nice people. But I just told them that I would just let all of you know that as they start reaching out, I mean, they'll try and set up a Zoom call to just kind of ask a couple questions at your availability. So other than that, there's no administrative business. We'll go ahead and just get this thing rolling and move on to the updates from the Department of Health and Department of Agriculture and Food. And we'll first turn over time to Mr. Oborn.
Great. So general statistics that Department of Health and Human Services can share is a monthly report, which we post at the end of or at the beginning of each month for the month previous. That is posted on our website. That shares that 101,200 active medical cannabis patient cardholders. That's as of the end of last month, and 986 qualified medical providers as of the end of May, and then 87 pharmacy medical providers as of the end of May as well. Also, as far as Center for Medical Cannabis implementation of the 2025 legislation that passed, we sent an email last week to medical cannabis pharmacies to remind them about upcoming changes to the uniform transaction fee. It's decreasing from $3 to $1.50. This is what patients pay each time they make a purchase at the medical cannabis pharmacy. And we asked them to share that info with all relevant staff members and to ensure that their facilities comply with the updated regulation. So they all are being reminded about that upcoming change. And then also beginning in July, medical providers will no longer have to pay a fee to register in the EBS to be a qualified medical provider. So that is something that's changing. There's some other small changes, but those are two major changes that are happening at the beginning of next month. And also just a heads up about some upcoming changes to our website and software that will launch on July 1, 2025. So a new version of the medicalcannabis.utah.gov DHHS website will launch on July 1st, and it'll be easier to use and more mobile friendly. And we're excited about that. And you're all welcome to visit the website and see if you have any feedback about the new one. You're welcome to share those once it becomes effective on July 1st. And then also the electronic verification system, the EVS, is changing, and the changes that are happening make it easier for patients to do tasks like print their card, make a payment, or renew their application on their phones. So we've been able to make these minor enhancements, and they'll all become effective in July. That's all. Are there any questions about any information I shared?
Rich, what type of communication will be going out to patients about the fee change?
We have an email that is being finalized right now, and it shares information about the fee changes. And so they'll be aware of those as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll likely, we're just finalizing the approval of that this week, and so it'll go out for the end of the month.
All right, any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Forsyth.
Thank you. Just real quickly, we had the opportunity to go out to Canada this past week with some other regulators from other states. It made me very grateful for what we have going on here in Utah. We really do have a unique program that I think is very patient focused. And talking with the other regulators, some of them did have some really great things going on in their state too, but there are also a lot of problems out there. It made me very grateful for the board and all those that are participating here, as well as our producers here in Utah and our pharmacies. It really does seem like we have an industry that cares about patients, and that makes a big difference. So big shout out to everybody in the industry and to all of you on the board, and DHHS as well. We got a good thing going here. In addition to that, we have a pharmacy license that is going to be opening up this year. We're planning to open that on July 1 for applications to be submitted to the department. We'll also be printing out a newsletter or a notice from our communications team. But wanted to let you guys all be aware of that. It'll be open for a period of 1 month, and we plan on formally awarding it later this year, probably in October. But that timeline is not certain at this point. I think that's it.
All right, any questions?
I do have a question, Matt, if I can ask it.
Go ahead.
Dr. Forsyth, do you have an update on the ICS launch? You guys have a firm date, or are we still targeting sometime generally in August?
Yeah, sometime generally in August. I would love to have a firm date for you, but I don't have one yet.
Okay. All right, well, we will move right along, and we do have some draft rules. Go ahead and turn time over, it says myself, but I'll call on, is it gonna be Cody?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. James.
Sure. You want the credit, need to do the work.
We took out a lot of stuff.
Thanks, Matt. Cody James, Deputy Director of the Specialized Products Division at the Department of Ag. Before I get into the rules really quick, and I won't take the whole 45 minutes, I don't believe here, just kind of a reminder to the board, as I talked about this a couple months ago when we brought the first couple of rules to you. But the department's moving towards leaning more on statute than on rules. Only going to be kind of putting rules in place when it's required by statute or when further clarification may be needed, depending on what's been going on within the industry or not. The Department of Agriculture overall has actually adopted our division's direction on this and is moving forward with what they're calling the Clear the Rules initiative. Part of that is going to be similar to what I said of leaning on statute more than rule in places that we can, and also removing any redundant language or the exact same language that's in rule or that's in statute from the rule type of thing. So a lot of those changes that I'll mention today kind of go to that as well. So I'll start with R66-3, the quality assurance testing rule. The definitions removes a whole bunch of definitions here because all of those are already defined in statute, with the exception of pest, which after looking at, we didn't feel like we actually needed test in there. That overall, because it doesn't really matter what the pest is as much as the pesticides in the product. Moving down to 4. On to number 3. What we are doing is this actually came from as a request from Wholesome. If you look at number 5 on R66-3-3, what it allows for is that a processor may test cannabis plant product and as both for cannabinoids. It adds a little bit of a time frame to make decisions based on this as well, but again, a processor could get cannabis plant product tested in bulk. As long as they understand that no processing other than the packaging and labeling can take place on that product after testing, unless they decide to actually, based on the test results, decide to make it or reclassify it as byproduct. They'd have 10 business days to do that, let the department know. And then just as a reminder in there that any other final product adulterant testing would need to be performed after testing there. So again, just a quick recap. Flour could be tested in bulk for cannabinoids at the processor level. And then hopefully making life easier for packaging and things like that. So obviously some renumbering that goes on after adding those things into it, but then as you get down to it would be the new 14. HB 54 allowed the remediation or the quality assurance or maybe proactive approach to radiating cannabis by a grower. Overall, looking at the language, it allows production establishment to go ahead and do that. So we put this wording in here about a production establishment being able to do remediation for microbials by using the radiation there, as long as it's in their approved or in their approved plan. So hopefully that's a good thing. Moving on down here, as we look at numbers 15 through 18, just a quick reference to the statute here. 4-41A 702 states that for quality assurance failures of cannabis or cannabis products, the product will be placed on hold. The department will investigate and make a determination. The establishment can appeal the determination. But if after all of that, the department determines that the product is unsafe for human consumption, then the department can seize, embargo, or destroy the cannabis or cannabis product. After reviewing the statute fully and several times, there are no rulemaking authority on quality assurance failures. So a slight change to remediation plans here. Final product won't be able to be remediated if it goes through the whole process of obviously a quality assurance failure, the department doing its job, and then the facility, appealing the determination, whatever that determination comes out to be. However, you see, look down about 18, that concentrate can be remediated. So just to define what a concentrate is based on statute, is the product of any chemical or physical process applied to naturally occurring biomass that concentrates or isolates the cannabinoids contained in the biomass and any amount of natural cannabinoid or artificially derived cannabinoid in an artificially derived cannabinoid purified state. So again, overall statute does not mention remediation whatsoever, with the exception of the use for radiation. And it does talk about what happens with more final product than it does concentrate. So why the department felt we could move forward with remediation on concentrate, but the products will probably go through a little bit different aspect. Renumbering took place again. But then other than that, you'd have to drop down to the very bottom under R66-313, which was a added aspect to it. And I do need to tell you that we did end up changing it since I sent the draft into. It's almost the exact same wording, but it's instead of saying at the lab's capability, it actually just says each sample and related lot or batch of cannabis plant product, cannabis concentrate, cannabis product shall be tested for terpenes. So the reason for that really is and keeping it broad is to allow the labs to test for what terpenes they can overall, but not be able to hold them to that. Not necessarily hold them to that, but to force them into a situation where not going to be able to test them just at this time. So we hope that those tests get better and better as time goes on. Dr. Force, I don't know if you want to add anything to that terpene portion.
Yeah. Both labs and any lab that comes into this space, we would expect to test for the extended terpenes that are working with them on that. We just didn't want to lock anything that might be difficult for a lab to achieve if there didn't have any major value antibiotic patients, like testing for some obscure terpenes, it's not really affecting most of the flowers. But if there are persons that producers or patients are concerned about, please reach out to the department. And let us know if those aren't being tested for, and we can put emphasis on it.
That is the end of R 66-3, the quality assurance testing, just a handful of changes. Some of a couple of, probably bigger, changes as far as, the testing goes for, bulk flower and obviously the remediation portion. So we don't see that that's gonna be a huge, there's not actually a whole lot of failures with the final product anymore. So hopefully that's, not going to face too much, but.
Cody, can you, going back to the R 66-3, the change that's being added in for bulk testing from a processor side?
Yeah.
How is that different than what's happening today? Because I mean, today we can test. I'm just trying to see why we have to put it in a rule.
So to allow someone to do bulk testing on the cannabinoid and then put in final results, and you're right, some of them were doing that, you're just formalizing it.
Okay. So this allows them to keep that test if they choose
Put it
to.
on.
Yeah, Matt, what we couldn't do is we couldn't use that final package testing, right? For potency and like that, or if you did bulk testing, we couldn't use that potency for final package testing. The way the rule was written is you had to, when you got it retested at the final package stage, it had to be tested for potency again. So really from our perspective, this is just going to make packaging and labeling a whole lot easier. We can apply the fact panel prior to packaging the flower, so it can lay flat instead of trying to put a fact panel on a bag that has flower in it. So it's no different than the rule currently is for concentrates, right? If you have bulk concentrate and you get it tested, at the bulk phase, or when you get it tested at the bulk phase, you can use those cannabinoid results for final package, assuming that it hasn't gone under any other changes or has been incorporated into an infused product. So it just matches up with what's already allowed for concentrates and for vapes as well, which we worked with Dr. Forsyth and UDAF on previously. I think all it really kind of leaves out there is edibles, which Cody knows that we're in conversation about that as well for very similar types of testing, right? Cannabinoid testing in bulk, and then adulterant testing once it's final packaged to ensure it's safe for patients.
Okay. All right.
If I can, before Cody moves on to that next rule, I wanted to go back to the remediation section, Cody, if we can. So obviously before, right, if anything has failed quality assurance testing, people have been allowed to submit remediation plans that go beyond, right, or have different forms or plans for remediation than just irradiation. At this point, what we're being told is that if it fails at any point in the process, some sort of quality assurance testing, the only way that it can be remediated at this point is through irradiation. So if there are other plans for remediation, those are no longer going to be accepted. It's either put x-rays through it or throw it away.
At the final product level, that's correct. With the exception that I believe the use of irradiation, it does say in the statute, and I'll double check that, but is for microbials. So that's and I could be wrong on that. It's been a minute, but I'll check on that before we're done today. But yeah, so concentrate overall, as I defined it, if that fails for something, remediation can happen. But it's really that, I think that line that can get crossed when it becomes final product. And that's what.
Okay, so
it stops with the exception.
Yeah, so outside of concentrates, right? Because obviously it looks like concentrate is different, where it talks about resampling or retesting, if it's been failed, if it fails. If I fail a final product, say flour, at the final product, final packaging stage, my option is to remediate it or throw it away. There's no other potential remediation, but that's only for microbials. What if it fails for foreign matter or something else? Is there still potential remediation, in addition to, that we can apply for?
Yeah, the way that we read the statute, no, but it does give, like, for foreign matter would be a good example that you brought up, is that you can come to the department and actually try and argue that. And so there might be a reason to retest. Things like that, right? We've had that several times, and that's a low number, right? Possibly find a hair, something else that's in there, and then we sample and figure that it can go forward, so.
All that being said, like, we are trying to follow statute as closely as possible on all this. And Cody's interpretation of that, well, the department's interpretation of that, I do believe is correct at this time. We're happy to work with industry and patient groups to try to correct anything in statute this next session, to try to keep it making sense, to minimize the loss of any product that is produced in Utah unnecessarily. You know, a lot of times it probably doesn't make sense to remediate a gummy, for example, because if it's failing for something, like trying to extract the cannabinoids out of that, probably the juice isn't worth the squeeze type of situation. But for other things like flour, if somebody wanted to remediate that by doing extraction and turn it into another product, you can easily get rid of any contaminants from that. So we definitely.
So would you? Oh, sorry, go ahead. So you would consider like, even though it's not technically irradiation, if someone's flour fails at the final product stage and they choose to remediate it through extraction, that you're saying that would still be allowed?
No, that currently, based on this new rule and what it says in statute, that would not be allowed. But I am saying we would be happy to work with you guys to get that changed in statute next year.
Okay.
When is, what was it, you said 441 is the statute?
Yeah, 441A.
702. And I can read that for you, word for word, if you want to.
Are you in works correcting that already? Is there a plan to allow extraction as a remediation?
No. When this rule goes into force, we are going to be operating under that rule. We don't expect this will be a huge problem because we don't have a lot of failures. But we are open to making a change to statute this next session. I'm happy to work with industry and patient groups to do that.
Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Any other questions on quality assurance testing rule or? So I can actually go to that, you want me to read that verbatim now on what the 702 states?
No, I'm sure we can find it if we choose to.
I can say I got it.
So- Yeah.
Okay, then I'll move on to R6-4. This is the independent cannabis testing lab rule. Again, within the definitions, we removed all the definitions with the exception of applicant and lot because they were all in the statute. Moving down to R6-4-3. We're removing lines 4 through 7 and 9 through 11 as these are actually going to be placed in R66-9, which is our licensing rule. So it'll just spell out the things that need to happen for your license there. Things that we're keeping on here is what a license or a laboratory license allows you to do, as well as the expiration timeline of 12 months. Down to the next section, which is 4. Most of that stays intact, with the exception of 11 and 12. 11 is actually under someone else's jurisdiction, something that most companies and businesses, especially labs, have to have in place as far as emergency procedures. Someone else, and then also the compartmentalization aspects of all of our rules we're removing there just because of the crossover it takes and how everything's set up there is keeping a lot of this stuff completely separate and keeping agents from being able to work in different compartments doesn't seem to work. So figure that would be more on the licensees to keep that training up and make sure the right people are in there rather than just making them do something that may not be really something that can be done. Next is the security requirements, is just like with the growers and the processors. Remove the majority of that just because it's all in statute overall and it's not quite as in depth and to the point as our rule is. But again, taking back there does say security requirements need to be in the statute. We did keep in there the minimum requirements for video surveillance. And then also in what would be 1 B allows for the clear and certain identification of any person and activity there. So again, just mostly camera type of stuff there. The rest of that is mostly taken out until you get down to what used to be 8 and would now be number 2. Keeping the visitor log aspect in place and how visitors need to be badged. If you go through, not specifically in statute doesn't call these out, but it does say overall in one form or another that all these things are going to be required. So we did decide to keep the visitor log back there with everything. A good example was we're adding and age. This just because the statute says that every visitor has to be at least 18 years old to visit. So not too much of a change there with the exception of that addition with the age to the visitor log. Next one is inventory control, and just like we did with processors and growers, remove the portions about having to be reconciled in the inventory at the close of each business day, as the statute says that it actually should be in real time. We are understanding of where we're at with the ICS system and stuff, and so we will always take that into account. But the rest of that stays in place there. Moving on to 7, cannabis, testing lab agents. Remove the portion really about the application, because the application portions are talked about in the rule, and then just the application needs to be filled out in that aspect. So we just remove that for simplification. And then really just keeping that they have to have their ID badge and things where we can see it in case of an inspection, things like that. Completely remove transportation, which used to be 8 there, just because it talks about that completely in statute. Which we get down to cannabis waste disposal, which in other rules, so far we'd actually removed the whole portion of it, but in this one, because there's some differences here for labs, we kept a portion of it in here, 1 and 2 specifically, but we removed kind of the rules between 2 and 10, but then kept the last portion here, and that's because the lab can actually send their waste material to either our lab or then on to a research university, things like that, for some testing and some different things like that. So thought that was probably something that could be need to be done or wanted to be done in the future. So kept that as it was, a little bit different than what is just required in statute that pretty much says you have to destroy it according to federal and state regulations. That brings us down to what it would be 9, and that's the change in operating plans. Didn't make any changes there. Be the same as it has been. Renewals. Really only made one little change, and that's just kind of the wording. Instead of on or before the expiration date to by the day of the license expiration, just trying to be consistent with our wording throughout our rules there. The next one was actually, which would be 11. It used to be proficiency testing, and now it's we've added the additional testing. So this is somewhat based on the conversation that happened with the board last month about having the labs run some tests and kind of doing a study, if you will, on that type of thing. Proficiency testing is actually mentioned or talked about in statute, so we don't necessarily need it in rule. But we thought it was a good idea to add this ability, so maybe an independent lab couldn't really say they don't want to take part of a study like we're talking about here, and make it so that if the department wishes to establish a testing program for the study, then they can. So that's what that portion's about. So a few changes there, just to consist again, removing the proficiency portion and really making it that there could be some extra testing that a lab is required to do for the good of the program, hopefully. Then lastly, the violation categories, the only things we did, instead of selling and unlicensed, we went to sent and unapproved, and again, or received and unapproved, and on 1B or A and B. Again, that's just to be consistent with language throughout other rules and what's going on there. So overall, this one is just really a push again, or a lean on the statute more than it is any major changes to anything. So, I'm done with that one.
All right. Any questions or comments on that? Doesn't look like there are. Appreciate your time. Oh, JD?
Come on, Matt, you know I always got something to say.
I can't-
Just wanted
yes.
to just wanted to reiterate to the department. I appreciate that, you know, y'all are streamlining your rules and relying more on statute than on rule. But for someone reading this, it's suggesting that a whole bunch of regulation is being removed. And I would again just encourage the department to put out some sort of communication that either cross-references the areas where this will be enforced via statute, or at least to let operators know, including independent labs, that this will now all be enforced through statute as opposed to rule. Because like I said, if you just read this without any proper context, you think that there's a whole lot of stuff you don't have to do anymore. And I would hate for operators, including these labs, to get caught, you know, in any confusion. So I just encourage the department to think through that and possibly issue some kind of guidance or cross-reference document.
Good feedback, Dave. We will.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm a medical.
give me just 1 second. I'll open up a public comment. So after the board's done. Anyone else from the board? Okay. All right. So we do have someone who'd like to make a public comment. If you want to come up to the table, state your name and affiliation, you have 2 minutes.
It also affects veterans on the drug law. The state Supreme Court acknowledging 2 lawyers' testimony.
Can I get you to state your name and affiliation?
Jonathan Peterson,
Okay, thank you.
and I am a medical marijuana card holder, but I didn't renew it. I was trying to find something cheap, like I said, you know, online. But it says in your law that if I don't renew my card, that I can't legally possess. I understand not buying from a dispensary. I can't possess or use. That's not constitutional. I need a lawyer on that one. If you guys, that's part of the rules, you know, if you don't pay that extra $100 and the 15, and poor people sometimes have trouble doing that. That it says you can't lawfully do it. I spent 14 years researching constitutional law, and the state Supreme Court, in their wisdom, and the Fed say they don't have to abide Brady rules. So we're going to end the stupid drug monopoly law that includes marijuana. And we're going to have adults go to a pharmacy without having to pay for permission each month for the same medicine they're going to use the rest of their life. And lawyers know of these. I would like to give each of you one of this so you can review. You could call the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney, Governor Cox. The list goes up because we just don't want to have bad laws ruling over, causing crime. And I never heard the news say, well, in Mexico, they don't have people dying of fentanyl in the streets and stuff because any adult can go to a pharmacy in Mexico and buy whatever they have. So all the deaths down there is getting that 40 billion out of us. Right? I want everyone to have, because this is the end. We're going to end it peacefully because no lawyer can withstand this test. And it's true, I served the Lord, but I'm also a veteran and I defend the Constitution. And there's no way.
All right.
I lost. I can't hear anything.
That is one ridiculous law, and I challenge any lawyer to look at that and say, oh, because we don't do that with opiates, which I have prescription, I can have any of that.
Okay.
And we sell methamphetamine from pharmacies. So, you know, we can just be smart and do what's constitutional, and we'll have peace in
Yeah.
this nation.
I think we can have you sign that form too.
And I'm available. There's a test for any lawyer to find out.
Okay.
All right.
Let us.
We do have some other items to go through. I appreciate
And I hope
the
you bring
input.
up the part about, I can't legally possess, because I'm perfectly willing to go up with some THC product and have them show them I don't have an up-to-date card.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. And then we'll bring it back to the board, and I'll just make the comment here, as we stated at the beginning, is as members of the public, if you have any agenda items you would like us to discuss, please email them to MCPAB
Oh,
at
look,
utah.gov.
that's that timing. It said it was 2 to 4 online, so I'm way late.
No, you're good. You're good. All right. We appreciate the time. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is medical cannabis purchasing limits. So do you want to bring up that presentation, Jeremiah? All right, so at the last working governance group, it was brought up by a member of the public for them / I took it upon ourselves to look at purchasing limits by patients in Utah. So I had asked the Department of Health to try and provide some information on what are patients actually buying when it comes to the limits. So the way the law is currently written, there's 2 separate limits. You have a limit on flour, and then you have a limit on it was labeled on here as non-flour products, so concentrated products, which essentially is everything else that's not a flour. And so it's just interesting to kind of look in to see. I know there was a lot of discussion on what should we do with limits. We hear all the time that people are maxing out their limits, and what does that look like? And so some of the information that was on here, so start with the flour, is about 30 to 50 patients on average for the last 6 months were buying the maximum amount of flour. So that's 4 ounces or 113 grams. But when you dig into those numbers, 75% of patients didn't even buy flour at all. Secondly, another 19% bought less than a quarter, so 28 grams. And then 4% bought up to 50%. So if you add those up, you're looking at about, 98% of all patients did not bought less than half the allotted amount. So, all right. And so in looking at that, I mean, obviously there's a huge amount that are staying well with under the limit. So that puts it about 1.5%, 2% or above 50% or more. When looking at the concentrated portion, it was either 0 or sometimes upwards to high as 20, actually bought the maximum amount of 20 grams. And for context, this is 20 grams of total THC. So which means it's not just 20 grams of product, it's a not the concentrate, it's a cumulative amount. So they're adjusted by THC percentage, whether that's in a cartridge, in a topical, in gummies, in a tincture, and those are I guess, suppository. I like to bring that one up. I don't think there is one yet. But in that number, 53% of patients did not buy flour product. 37% bought a 25% or lower, 7% bought 50% or lower. And I mean, it's about the same numbers as flour, about 2.5%. So a very small margin. And so when I was digging kind of through this on the key findings on here, right? I mean, obviously majority are avoiding purchasing either one product or the other. Most buy below the limit, few reach the limits. So, I mean, obviously, looking at these numbers, the limits appear to be sufficient for most patients' needs. Obviously, there are a few that are getting to that max. And I think one of the things I had kind of read through, and this is kind of, I think I've listed them on the next steps, is, obviously we could assess if the current limits meet the diverse patient needs, right? Looking at that, we're not hitting the maximums. The only thing I wish I could have gotten a little bit more information on were the people who are maxing out their flour, are they also maxing out the concentrates? And because that was such a small number, we weren't able to kind of get that data. But it would be interesting to know, do we have many patients? I think one thing is maybe enhanced patient education on their limits. Are patients aware of what they can and cannot buy? Are many buying 1 month and then not buying the next? Just kind of like, a lot of times it's bulk buying, right? They'll go in to think, hey, this is a great deal. Let me buy as much as I can today to save for tomorrow and continue to going forward. I would like to see just kind of continued monitoring in EVS if this trend moves or changes. It was one of the things I kind of saw. And then really at the end of the day is, do we need as an advisory board, is there any sort of change we would want to make? I had a different memo written, not knowing what the numbers were, just looking off what information was provided, I think last month when we looked at purchasing limits based off what other states are doing, and I kind of threw that memo right out the window because it really didn't justify what we're currently seeing on the purchasing trends. But yeah, that's my presentation. Any questions or thoughts?
My first thought is that 53% at the very top tells you why so little is being bought. I think it's affordability and price. Most patients I hear from are saying that it's unaffordable for them.
And obviously the numbers I got aren't gonna, there's no causation on price. I mean, we weren't looking at that. We were just looking at purchasing trends. But I mean, yeah, I mean, we know from studies in the past that price is a huge factor and a determining factor when it comes to purchasing medical cannabis, or as we heard, staying in the medical cannabis program. So, thank you. Yeah, Des,
Yeah,
you can go ahead.
I'm trying to learn how to raise my hand like like an adult, but
You
I
can up and
okay.
down.
I'll work on adulting later. I looked at these and from the beginning, we were really happy with the amounts that we got, knowing that majority of patients wouldn't need them, right? Like we didn't create limits like, oh, this is on average what people would need, because we have enough that if you're a chronic pain patient, you're terminal, that there's enough for you to still have the right supply, right? We still run into patients that hit these limits, and we've never been able to extend them. So when I see these numbers, I feel like this is a really good indicator that patients are and their primary care physicians and the pharmacists, that they're all striking a balance and not needing to exceed a limit that's maybe unnecessary, that they're staying low, they're going slow. And I think that this really shows that we've done exactly what we wanted. Patients aren't all the time hitting their limits. And I think that just proves that we have a really good limits put on Utah. So I see this as a huge win.
Yeah.
My other input as far as flower goes is that it's probably because it's not combustible. As a
Yeah.
patient, that's a
Yeah.
deterrent.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
to buy a device in order to use it, and sometimes that's just more expensive.
It's-
Most patients I talk to that buy flour turn it into something like honey or butter, never chocolate, because that would be bad.
I do have a comment regarding the limits.
Yep.
As a QMP, it would be nice if the EBS has a way to notify a QMP if a patient is consistently hitting their limit. Because that would tell me that something's not right. And I would personally want to reassess the patient's condition to make sure they're getting the best care possible. If they need an alternative treatment or something in addition to the using the medical cannabis. But if I have a patient that's hitting the limit, regularly, I would like to know
beforehand, like within a certain
like
number of
if
grams.
they hit their limit 2 months in a row or something, I would probably call them and want to see them, not necessarily as a QMP, but as as their provider. Or perhaps if I was only their QMP, I may consider sending a message to the patient's primary care provider. Hey, listen, I'm so-and-so's QMP. They've hit their limit twice in the last 2 or 3 months. They've maxed out their medical cannabis. Perhaps you may want to bring them into the office and discuss their treatment plan for pain or whatever it is that they're being treated for or using.
Yeah. And if I can just explain a little bit
Yep.
more about what is possible currently in the EBS is medical providers can always go in and see if they're at the limit already, but they have to proactively go and do it. There's not a notification by email
Right.
to the,
And I
medical
check that
provider.
when I
Yeah.
do renewals and such, I look at their history over the past, 6-12 months.
Mhm.
But if I see somebody who's been hitting their limit for the last 12 months in a row, it's probably something I would have liked to known earlier rather than having to check all these patients every month to see
Sure.
what they're doing. Just an idea or thought, perhaps, and maybe we can put it out to QMPs if they would, as a survey, if they would like to know whether or not their medical cannabis patients regularly hit their limits, so they could perhaps come up with some type of a plan, with the QMP and or their primary care provider, if they're not both already.
and we have a quarterly virtual meeting with medical providers, and they're all invited to join that, and we can add that to the agenda for that meeting. Get some input there. And follow up with you, Chris, and let you know.
Thank you, Chris. I honestly didn't think of that one. All right, anyone, any other comments from the board? Okay. We do have some people who wanted to make some public comment. We'll go ahead and. Do you have a little sheet? Yeah, I can get that. Those of you that are online, if you would like to make a comment, this is the time to raise your hand, and at which time you will be selected. Let's see, so we do have a Bijan Sakaki, if you want to come on up.
Beehive, but I'm not speaking on Beehive's behalf today. I'm speaking for my patient add-on. I am one of the 0.5%, believe it or not, who do get a fund. So I do see where there could be challenges. I'm in a more fortunate position where I can afford the medication, I have access to it. So that's not the general patient. So I will say I'm in a good position, but when I do hit my limits, it is challenging. The only options I have are illicit market or recreational states run. I haven't done that because I've been able to stockpile when I hit my limit. I have stuff, medication for myself for different uses. So it has been, there's a few patients that I've experienced this with, and I'm like, look, I get it. The only option is you have to go to Wendover or we can't serve you. So as a result, my gastroenterologist, so I use for ulcerative colitis, I've had it since I was 12. My GI did not believe that cannabis would be a benefit. He didn't believe that diet was beneficial either. Now he wants to become a QMP as a result, because if he has certain patients that aren't as much, not saying that they're all going to consume as much as I am, but I am an active, functional member of society, and we're running a small company, but I keep my limit every month. And I know that's hard for some of you guys to believe, but this has been my medication for 15 plus years. So I don't have a position, like I think as a patient, it'd be really awful if that limit went down. Like I would need to talk to my QP to ensure that I know certain situations for that patient, i.e. for end of life, we were able to statutorily change some rules where we needed to go over the limit, we could. But I think it'd be really limiting for people that aren't in a situation like myself that have access to it 7 days a week. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Bijan. Did we get any online? Is there anyone else in the room? Okay, here, you might pass this down. Let's get
Jonathan Peterson again.
Jonathan there.
Personal experience from back injury and then car accidents and the rest, that there are times when THC don't cut it. You're gonna have to take an opiate. But then as soon as you can get off of the opiates and then use THC, it's a safer medical, and this is experience for many years. And both my older brothers, veterans, they did construction and they were on opiates. And in 2013, the DEA made all the doctors cut back, and their only choice was to use alcohol and they both died within 2 years. They were using alcohol to treat pain. And one other thing, the prices here in dispensaries is almost double what it is where my son lives in Washington. And if you're poor, you ain't gonna ever hit the limit, even if you need it, because you can't afford the prices. And it drives you to, you know, illegal market or out of state. And so we need to think about the poor. How are they going to afford it? Because if you have to go to a doctor for opiates each month, you're gonna have to give them $200, $250 a month. And that doesn't pay for the drug. So we're not considering the poor as we should. And I hope that by finding out if this is real, then we're gonna have a whole new setup, similar to Mexico, and we're gonna treat alcohol addicts like other drug addicts. You can't drive, you can't do other things, but you don't lock them up for treating their pain as they choose. God bless America. I serve the Lord, and that means I love all my neighbors. I don't have to like them all. I don't like drug dealers. I want to put them out of business. I want it to be all legal and fair. And that will do it if you just verify health.
Thank you, Jonathan. Is there anyone online who raised their hand? Looks like we do have a couple. All right, go ahead. Nareth, you have been unmuted. If you can state your name and affiliation.
Hi guys, this is Nareth the Dragonfly. I just wanted to kind of state the inherent bias that exists in the data that we just presented there. The reality is if you're somebody who is buying more than 4 ounces of flour, you're not buying it from a regulated cannabis pharmacy. You are getting that from the illicit market because the cost of affordability to purchase ounces, you would never pay those prices if you're somebody who has to make your own medication, make your own edibles, which there are a lot of people that do that. And at the prices that you're paying inside of regulated pharmacies, that would never pencil out and make sense. So there is a large majority of people who buy a lot of it, just not from our regulated pharmacy. So by having these limits imposed, we basically prevent those people that are currently shopping in the black market from ever getting in. So really at the end of the day, those are things that we look at is the illicit market, our patient base. How do we serve those patients that are being forced to get their medicine through illegal, illicit ways? That's just reality of the bias of the data. If we just look and say, oh, well, nobody's doing it. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. If that's everyone, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the board. All right, any other comments? Oh, do we have, oh, JD.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Bajan for his comments. I think, you know, with this data, you know, it may seem like there are, you know, very few patients that are utilizing the limits, but to me, I think, as Des said, I think this data shows that the limits are working. And one thing I would remind folks of is when we looked at this previously, the data that and some of the information that Des presented last month, Utah is from what I could tell in the middle, right, when it comes to purchase limits, right? We're not on the bottom end, we're not on the top end. And I think that's something that's, you know, useful to take into consideration. And another thing I want to, you know, just reiterate to folks, and I'm sure, you know, this is well taken, is, you know, even if the government, you know, the legislature decides to do something about purchase limits, right, and reduce those limits, people are not going to stop using cannabis. They're not going to say, oh, I reached my 15, you know, my 15 grams of concentrate this month, or whatever number they decide on. If they need to treat their symptoms, they're going to continue to find outlets for that. So we can either make this program accessible to Utahns to legally purchase cannabis in Utah from a legally regulated source, or we can force these people to go find other avenues for their medicine. I think one of the arguments I hear all the time of, oh, it just, you know, if we put these limits in place, you know, it's gonna curtail this type of behavior. No, it is not. And that doesn't make those patients criminals. It does not make those people bad people because they are going to seek out other avenues for their medication. So we either make this program successful and make it work for Utahns to remain legal patients in Utah, or we force them to go prop up the economies of other states, other adult use markets, or we force them to become criminals and purchase in the illicit market. We can't have it. We can't have it both ways. We can't say that we don't want the illicit market and then enact regulations and police our program in such a way that we force that kind of behavior. We can't say that we don't want patients crossing state lines and committing federal crimes by going to an adult use state to get a form factor or to get a, you know, or to get something that they can't get here in Utah, right? And then say, oh, well, we don't want that, but we're going to continue to enact legislation, or we're going to continue to act regulations that are going to force that type of behavior. And again, if the ultimate goal of lawmakers, and I'm not saying this is or this isn't, is to prevent adult use from coming to Utah, these are the types of common sense reforms that we need. We do not need to walk back purchase limits. We do not need to limit form factors. We do not need to make it harder to become a medical cannabis patient, because all we're going to do is prop up criminal behavior or the economies of other states. And I just can't say that enough. You're going to over-regulate this to a point where you're just going to force it to be criminal again. But you can't then at the same time say we don't want the criminal element if you're not going to do things to curtail the criminal element.
Thank you, JD. Not anything else? You're flying right along. So, yeah, I mean, I think for us, I mean, it's obviously, this is not there's no recommendation that I'm looking for to present. I think kind of what JD and what others have said today is, you know, when I was looking at all the other states, I mean, Utah's in a good position. I mean, I think we started this program with very reasonable limits. I mean, if there was a recommendation to be made, it would be to kind of maybe separate out some of the concentrates, as those can become difficult for certain individuals as they buy certain ones that are more like tinctures and things like that are high potency. It adds up quick, and it's only a couple bottles. But obviously, looking at the data, it doesn't say that, you know, we have thousands of patients that can no longer buy product because they're purchased out of it. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's protecting what we currently have is important. We have a very robust program, and we want to make sure that the patients continue to have the same access to the purchasing going forward as well. So, all right, with that, we'll just move on to the next item, which are agenda items. Our agenda item tracker is getting quite lean. And so what I want to go through is to see, starting next month, next month on our agenda, we will be doing a vote for chair and vice chair. We will also have a potentially new or staying the same seat that is available, which is the patient representative. Nanette here to my left. And so those are a couple items we'll be taking care of. I think we do have a training we'll have to do since it's a new year. So that'll be involved in our meeting. We'll also fill out our conflict of interests again.
Right.
So there's a lot of administrative work that we'll be going through next. Yeah. But I think starting in July especially is going to be important going into the summer. The working governance group is going to get started again up in August, is usually when they start up their meetings. And I think it's important, as we did this last year, to get a lot of topics to them prior to the legislative session. So if there's any bill ads that they want to work on, so that way they can get started on it sooner rather than later. And as we've seen, anything late to the session usually doesn't get added. And so there's a lot of things that they can get missed. So we'll kind of, if you guys have any suggestions or topics that you want to see, either present them now or please email MCPAB at Utah.gov or Trevor with your agenda items so we can try to get them listed. So turn the time over to you guys.
Would you like me to pull up the item tracker? Just
Yeah, you can.
let me see if I can do that here.
As a reminder, there have been some items that have already been approved and submitted to lawmakers that have been reviewed since the last session already. And those have already been forwarded to lawmakers in preparation for the 2026 session.
We had housing protections was one, not housing, job. We had the job protections one.
We did talk about that.
Yes.
For the vote in May.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see product limits on there because it means, I mean, from this information, we have patients that aren't being served by our program. So it means people are being left out and behind.
So you want to see an expansion of the product
I would.
purchasing limits?
Yeah.
That's something you want to take?
Yeah, I guess.
Would that be on recommendation of a QMP, meeting with a QMP and making that recommendation?
I mean,
Through EBS.
isn't that how it's currently set up? Purchasing
Um,
limits are dictated by the recommending medical provider?
For an exception to the state limit, there's only a small group of individuals that would qualify for that. That has to be an end of life situation.
I think Danette was talking about just expanding beyond the 20 grams.
Right.
And then Chris is more mentioning, is it, you want to manage that?
Well, if a QMP would have the ability to make a recommendation to increase it above the 113 or 20 grams, depending on
Okay.
what form they're using.
Which is a different proposal, but I think that's definitely one that could be
Bring it. with-
brought in.
Right.
have
if
the
that's something.
discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think definitely it's, I mean, if you guys feel you want to, we can continue this discussion and
Sure.
to the next meeting and bring it in. If you have proposals that you want to see. I mean, the proposal I had was, I just didn't see, but I see everyone's side on it. If there's a QMP
Oh.
aspect to it, to increasing it.
Yeah,
Then-
I'll email.
Yeah, just
a
work with
recommendation
Trevor.
to Put on the,
Okay,
on the agenda item for you.
Okay.
I'll just scroll down here as well so you can see the last few.
Yeah. Do we know, has the Center for Medical Cannabis Research at the University of Utah, have they started their meetings? Are they doing, don't they have a?
Have they assigned?
Their
their
cannabis,
board?
I guess the Cannabis Research Review Board is what I'm saying. Did it move over to them?
It did, but they're not required to have public meetings.
Okay.
But-
Do they have like their own sort of timeline? Because, I mean, that is one of the things that as a board we review is, well, any recommendations from them,
uh-huh.
but also we have on there, let's provide them with recommendations on studies. I just want to make sure that if they're meeting, can we provide them with recommendations?
Yeah, so, and I'll emphasize this, the University of Utah Center for Medical Cannabis Research, their purpose is to facilitate research. It's not to actually do the research, it's to facilitate the researchers that at Utah State or at University of Utah or at other universities in Utah. And they do make a portion of their funding available for proposals to be able to qualify, to get some help from them as they, navigate, trying to gather the funds necessary to do the research that they want to do. So, but there's groups of researchers that are at the University of Utah that are separate from the Center for Medical Cannabis Research, who have plans that they're working on related to they've already, there's the Sublime study that they've already completed. The results of that, University of Utah is working on releasing soon. And they are interested in continuing that research. I think the board could choose to make an agenda item to invite the Center for Medical Cannabis Research to present at the next meeting about
Yeah, if they have any
research that
studies
they're
they've
aware
done.
of.
Yeah,
That might be a good move. You could invite them to come present. They'd be better prepared to present that on that topic.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think we can connect you with them.
With Valerie.
I think you have Valerie's email, right?
yeah, I do.
And then probably go through what would be the best way for y'all to support each other,
Yeah.
what those avenues would be.
Yeah, I know it was I think it was this month that didn't go effect, or May. I can remember.
yeah, it goes
change
into
over.
effect in May, and then there's other changes that,
Okay.
actually, the end of the Cannabis Research Review Board is July.
July,
Yeah.
okay. Right. All right. Well, yeah, maybe I'll connect with her and see if there's something she'd like to, if she has any information she'd like to, I think any sort of studies that have been done that are showing, regardless of the result, would be good to hear, especially to this board. So,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, is there anything else anyone would like to see?
Sorry, I can bring it back up.
Well, you're good.
Or I can start back at the top and slowly go back down.
Have you thought about emailing this out to us, maybe once a quarter, so we can see?
I'm
what
happy
we
to provide you
signed
the
up
link.
for?
Yeah,
That'd be
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, I can get the link out to you so you can view it.
All right. Okay, if you do have anything else, and those that do have any proposals you'd like to see, please reach out to Trevor. So he can get those added to the next meeting, but with that, that does. We will go ahead and end our meeting today.
Just not a whole few minutes, just I wanted.
Well, we've ended, but I appreciate your input today. Thank you.
His brother and wife, they didn't think pot for THC.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and end. You can talk offline in a minute.
Okay,
Yeah.
was a good thing.
So yeah, we'll go ahead and take the final motion, which is to adjourn. I'll speak up too
Motion to
quickly.
adjourn.
There you go. It is
Seconded.
approved. All right, we are done. 3:11.